This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Our conversations this morning open up in the financial sector, where banks across the country have declared record-breaking pre- and post-tax profits for the year 2024, with institutions like GTBank and Zenith hitting over 1 trillion naira. An analysis across the sector indicates that these profits were driven by investments in securities, foreign exchange revaluation gains, and interest in non-interest income services. What do these figures tell us across the banking industry, and what does it mean for the economy? Joining us to discuss this is Adegboyega Adebajo, an economist. Mr. Adebajo, good morning, and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning, Stephen. It's nice to be online with you again.
Our pleasure to have you. Mr. Adebajo, what are your initial thoughts on this report?
It shouldn't be something that wasn't expected. Banks have always been a crop of strategizing and thinking persons who are quite adept at what they do. And once you start to understand the nature of your business and the drivers to make the business efficient and possible, it becomes pretty much easy to work through. Let's also bear in mind that banking is a highly regulated sector, and the central bank just doesn't take its eye off the activities of these banks. So now when I say it was inevitable, the thing is this. Digital banking, using e-commerce, using the platforms, this has driven capacity of banks, made them more efficient, driven capacity in the sense that you just need to invest more in your IT infrastructure, and it means you use less actual human resource. And at the same time, more and more people are making payments electronically. And of course, we all know what the commissions and earnings will come from that. So this has driven their returns a lot. But I did hear you mention FX. And yes, you've got to understand that banks essentially manage other people's money. And those are real serious liabilities, customers' deposits. So they need to look after them well. And for this reason, you've got well-trained treasury guys who are looking at the market just to make sure that they do not have losses. So given the kind of balances they have and what they have available to relate with other international banks, it's not, in fact, it will be surprising if they made foreign exchange losses. There'll have to be something sudden that happened in the market. So yes, they have made FX gains. They have made a serious amount of money from electronic payments and transfers. And that's all reflecting.
So, Mr. Joe, if I pick out just two of the factors, maybe even actually two of the factors, if we look at the foreign exchange revaluation gains and we also look at the recapitalization efforts, these are not factors that occur yearly, if you like. They're not like rising interest rates where month on month or every time the MPC sits, there'll be some review or the other. Since these factors are not as solid as, say, the interest rates, is it, I wonder what that tells us about what next year could possibly be like, or what that simply tells us about the gains that were made in the year 2024.
Okay. Well, you did speak to the fact that they're raising capital, and that has come in most cases. Banks have no choice but to leverage that capital. They're not going to leave the money idle. And of course, the top banks, so what we refer to as the FUGAZ, FUGAZ, First Bank, Union Bank, Guarantee Trust, Access, and Zenith, they tend to be leaders in terms of size and reach. And when we talk about reach, I'm not just talking about Nigeria here, because ultimately, once the figures come in at year end, they're consolidating from all their operations. And so you will find that capital would always be directed to where it is required. And remember, the federal government is intent on growing the economy and has some idea about projects. In fact, I was just reading earlier this morning and late yesterday about the Securities Act the president signed. And he's actually made it much easier for states and local governments to raise money on the capital market or issue commercial papers, as it were. So you're going to find a lot of activities, municipal financing coming up. So that capital that has been raised will actually be directed to certain sectors of the economy. So we can expect interest income to actually play a role next year, in addition to electronic income, because the amount of money that is being paid or received through electronic means is actually increasing as cash being spent in the economy decreases. So I can only expect a growth. It may not be as large a growth. I mean, some of these increases between 2023 and 2024 were well over 60-70% growth. It may not be as large as that, but there will be growth.
And I guess that makes it interesting because you talked about the innovation from the banking sector, which is true. Year on year, this is one sector that continues to drive or lead the way in terms of profits. But I've seen a number of, if you like, independent analysts who point to this trend and say that it's an indication that our economy is not necessarily well balanced. So banking sector continues to lead. An institution like GT recorded more than 100% rise in profits compared to 2023. And then you look at manufacturing, you look at agriculture. There are several factors as to why these sectors continue to regress when you look at the financial year for the country. But what do you think need to be perhaps fundamental adjustments that allow these other sectors to, even if they're not competing, perhaps be a lot more viable than they are at the moment?
Well, actually, Nabila, you've actually hit the nail on the head. This was an element of a discussion I had with some friends over the weekend. If banks are doing this well, what actually is their role in the economy, and what are they doing really to hit the economy? Are they just businesses making profits and giving their shareholders returns, or are they lifting up other sectors of the economy? I said something earlier, and this may sound very capitalist, that ultimately capital or money will move in the direction where it will be efficiently used and it will generate returns. The other sectors you mentioned are truly crying out for investments. They're crying out for funding. But there's still a lot of inefficiencies. And what I hope is that as the government dots the I's and crosses the T's regarding sectors of the economy, they can look to these other sectors. We've got agriculture, we've got mining, there are other subsectors of manufacturing, but manufacturing is a major one. We've got aviation. There is a need to improve efficiencies in those sectors so that the risk perception for banks will not be too high, and there will be an inclination to actually push funding in that direction. Because that's what we have now. We have a situation where government securities are returning so much comfortably. So I can go to bed at night if I've got my money in government securities. I'm not going to sweat it too much. But if the money has come over to Adegboyega, Adebajo and Co., you're going to be worried because, there's lots of inefficiencies, power, logistics, human resource, supplies, marketing inefficiencies. And so it's a lot tougher for businesses. And that's why we're not seeing that rise in that sector of the economy. So is it mainly the role of the banks to ensure that this happens? I wouldn't quite say so, because they have to make their shareholders happy too. So it's a concerted effort, all of us, but primarily that of the government to ensure that all these other sectors are attractive enough, taking money from the banks.
Mr. Adegboyega, thank you very much for your time and expertise on this conversation. Adegboyega Adebajo is an economist who joined us this morning to speak on the 2024 reports of Tier 1 and Tier 2 banks, which have, in their reports, posted record-breaking pre- and post-tax profits for the year. He also spoke on the need of government to invest, a concerted effort of government and the private sector to invest in other sectors so that they can equally show these sort of profits. You're still listening to Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos, your Beyond the News station. We urge you to stay tuned. In a few short moments, our conversation continues in other areas.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.